Thanks so much to all my patrons. Join now to help support the channel and help pick the books I review on this channel. Link in the description. And I am done. Okay, so I just got done reading The Reigns of Liscor. This is book 7 of The Wandering Inn by pirateaba, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing this book, which was literally just right now. So, yep. Once again, this is a very easy 5 out of 5, and it just feels like pirateaba has hit the stride now, where I couldn't ever conceive of giving any of these books less than a 5 out of 5. I've only given one out of these 7 less. I gave it a 4, and it just had some weird pacing issues, but I like the content. But man, these things are good. It's just nonstop. These are amazing, and this is a cool feeling that I've never gotten before in a fantasy series, where there's like an endless amount of books out there for me to read. And I love them so much, but I also don't have that feeling of missing out on having to read them like back to back to back. They just give me this nice, calm, warm, like coming home to a nice cup of coffee feeling. So I just know that I have like the seemingly endless amount of books that I can read as I want to read them, in between some bigger series, and just to kind of mellow things out and just have a good time. And that's cool. And what I mean by that, if you haven't watched my Wandering Inn videos before, is that this is the longest fantasy series of all time, at least that I can find. I mean, the length of the series thus far is over 3 times the length of the entire Wheel of Time series. And that's known for being a very long series. And while that information can seem very intimidating, and it was intimidating to me when I opened up this series, as I get into this series, I almost get a sense of peace with that number, because it's this amazing feeling that I seemingly will never be able to catch up. I'm reading these books right now slower than the author is putting them out. And I read 2 to 3 a year, which is crazy. That's absolutely mind-boggling. And it's just this amazing, amazing feeling. I mean, every other series that I've ever read that's really long, I'm either reading it as the author's releasing them, like Stormlight Archive or something like that, where I get to the end of a book and I'm done, and I have to wait, sometimes a long time, for the next one to come out. Or it's a series like Malazan or Realm of the Elderlings that's already finished, and I just have this sense, almost looming dread as I read on in the series, because I know every page that I read, I'm getting that much closer to never being able to read more of it again. That's not the case here. And once I accepted that, it's so calming and wonderful, and I couldn't recommend this series more to people. And I just have a message to everybody that has told me that, Matt, this sounds awesome. Everything you say about it sounds great, but I can't get invested in such a long series because I'll never be able to catch up. Yeah, that's the point. Don't catch up. If you want to, great. It's there for you. That's an option. But if you don't want to, how awesome is that? That you know that every book is going to be great, that this is almost kind of just like a never-ending story you'll be able to read throughout your life. There's no feeling that it's just going to end and then you'll be done. And just pick it up and read it as you want. That's an amazing experience. That's more calming than any other type of book once you accept it. So just throwing that out there. So let's talk a little bit more about this book itself. But I also want to put a little disclaimer out there that I'm going to do this review a little bit differently than I have in the past. Normally when I do a book review, what I do is I spend a really long time talking about it in a non-spoiler fashion. And then every now and then I'll do a little spoiler section at the end. This time I'm going to do a little short intro to it. And then we'll talk spoilers for a longer amount of time, because I get the sense that almost everybody watching this has already read it. And they're watching this to be like, oh, Matt's finally starting to catch up to where we're at, or getting relatively closer. And they want to watch that kind of thing. I don't think a ton of people are watching this not having read this, because you probably wouldn't watch the 7th review. You'd watch the earlier ones. Now, I know there are some of you, so that's why I'm still doing some spoiler-free stuff, but we'll get to the meat of it in just a moment. So let's talk a little bit about the story, because this story is, in short, a Dungeons and Dragons-ish type of world. You have humans that have found themselves teleported to this world and don't know why. And they can level up just kind of like in Dungeons & Dragons, get classes, that sort of thing. But it's this great blend of slice of life, an epic fantasy, some horror elements, not a ton, but they're there. Just a ton of different things blended into one. I mean, it obviously has the lit RPG thing ingrained into the fiber of it, but it's wide-ranging. And it does this wonderful thing where normally when you have like a single book, you have this, the author has to be really punchy getting the story across. You can't waste any words. Then you get you get like a trilogy, and the author can waste some words. The author can do multiple point of views. The author can play with it a little bit more, but still, probably not realistic to go dealing with multiple countries and a huge swath of characters. You still got to kind of keep focused. On the longest of the series, the 10 to 15 book series, the 𝐒𝐮𝐲𝐻𝐿s, the Realm of the Elderlings, the Wheel of Times, you have a great amount of depth. You can do these crazy things. But even then, I didn't realize it until recently, even they have constraints. But then you get something like this, and it doesn't. It can just go right, like almost a full-page book talking about a little story, and then leave it for a long time and come back later. I mean, it can spend a great amount of time just dealing with some complex emotions that a character is having. This a major theme of this book, ingrained throughout it, was this idea that a group of people can be looked down upon because of what group they belong to, even though they themselves might not be bad. And that was constantly, that theme was hitting across in this. And to have a whole book talking about that, you wouldn't be able to do that in any other series. It just wouldn't, that's too many words wasted. But here, they're not wasted. And it's a beautiful, beautiful story. So this story itself, without doing too much spoiler, I'll keep it kind of vague, but in the book before this, which ended an arc, so these books come out, but they don't, there's like 2 or 3, maybe 4 books per arc. An arc, think of as like a beginning, middle, and end of the story, even though that it's all wrapped up into the same thing. But at the end of the last arc, a major, major, major character died. A character that was very important to the entire world, not just one little country, but continents. This is a very important person. And so this story, at least opening up, and maybe the other ones will as well, is the fallout from that death. How people felt about that, and the political ramifications for that happening. And so this character dies, and then you have many different stories going along, kind of playing with that. Not all of the storylines have to do that, but it's centrally ingrained in it. I mean, you've got this very fun dungeon crawling sequence, multiple dungeon crawling sequences. And these might be my favorite bits out of the series. I don't know if I can say that. There are so many favorites, but it is very, very entertaining the way the pirateaba writes these dungeon crawling moments. They're tense. They're fun. You get this sense of reward in them. It feels like I'm playing Diablo, but in literary format, with actual story going on that is engaging, and you care for the characters deeply, and you can't just hit restart. And that's addicting. I love them. You've got this character in the story that is nonverbal, but they have intelligence. And we've had this character for many books now, and all of a sudden we just got a long, long POV from this character. All of a sudden, just out of the blue. Thank you, pirateaba. That was awesome. I'm quite certain that is a fan favorite. Certainly, this fan is now has even more of a favorite character, and knowing what's going on through this character's head with a very interesting reveal involving this character. You've got multiple sets of goblins going on. I love the goblins. Each of the different groups of them, I'm just fascinated by this culture that they have. And you get to follow multiple groups around as they go around that I'm very interested in. You've got this very long sequence that would normally be like a full-size book involving the King of Destruction. The King of Destruction is this character who, years prior to this story, amassed enormous amount of power and threatened to kind of take over the world. And then kind of just gave up, decided to kind of die off, and all those followers just lost faith in him. And he's now found that will to live again and is starting this empire again and is a threat to the world. And the story about how he is slowly going from waking up to taking over a continent. That's fun. The story brings me to one of the walled cities. The walled cities are things we've only heard of until now. They're in the south of the main continent that's taking place on. But they're these enormous cities with drakes, like little dragons. Not little, I mean, they're decent sized, but they're not like full-on dragons. They're like dragon humans. And they're very important and powerful, and they have these huge cities with walls that are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet high. And the story very naturally brought us there, brought the main characters to there through a very, very fun storytelling device that I don't want to ruin, but felt very earned and was great, with a very fun set of politicking involved that's right up my alley because I work in politics. It was great. I mean, you got the grandest and most epic of long fight scenes that were involving like creatures the size of like houses. I did not know pirateaba was capable of writing such sequences. I mean, it honestly felt like, you had. I always think of something like a John Gwen or like a Joe Abercrombie in the fantasy genre of being like the best at writing battle sequences. But it's almost like pirateaba heard me saying that, which is not possible because I'm sure pirateaba wrote this before I even started doing reviews. But it's like pirateaba heard that and went like, hold my blue bug juice, which is in this. I'm going to write a sequence that's going to blow you out of the water, Matt, which happened. Just mind-blowing. Just when you think it can't get grander, it gets grander. And when you think that can't get grander, it goes, oh, here's 100 times more grand. That's the kind of stuff I'm here for. And when it's used too often, it doesn't work. But it worked really, really well here. You've got another really long sequence in this book that essentially was its own book involving a boy who thinks of himself as an emperor. And in this story, you get a class based on what you believe yourself to be. And this boy believes legitimately he's an emperor and becomes the class of an emperor, even though he doesn't rule a vast empire, but he rules a really small one and has these enormously powerful powers. Powerful powers? That's a dumb thing to say, Matt. But because he's granted this, and this character also is blind. I've never read a POV from a blind character before, but that's awesome. So, yeah, great story. The fantasy elements here were masterclass. The world building just continues to get bigger and grander, and I'm here for it. I mean, the character work is becoming truly great. You get to spend so much time with these characters, and pirateaba is growing as a writer as the story goes along. Me being able to read it like this, and experience these in kind of longer formats. Most people that are reading this are reading them chapter by chapter, but for me to read them as a book, I mean, I can see the growth as the writer as they go along, and that's great. The prose is improving. I mean, I'd still say it's in the middle of the pack in fantasy, but with every other, if I was to make like a chart of all the strengths of this author, prose would be the weakest, but it's still good, and everything else is like perfection. And that's amazing. So, yeah, highly recommend this to everybody. I mean, the only people that I don't recommend this to are like fantasy snobs. And I'm not trying to castigate you for that. I'm trying to say this as like truthfully as possible. But if you're in a story for prose and you want beautiful, beautiful, flowery writing that feels poetic, which I like that kind of thing a lot, you're probably not going to like this, if that's what you need out of a story. But if you want to have a good time, if you want to have fun, if you're a video game fan, which has a lot of elements here, if you're a Dungeons & Dragons fan, if you're a big epic fantasy fan, this is the story for you. So I'm going to cap off the review there for the non-spoilers. Let's jump into the spoilers. I'm talking to you, Wandering End fans. Let's get into it, because I have some real thoughts. I want to talk spoilers and really go deep down into it. And I don't have a ton of time left because my camera will only shoot for 30 minutes. So let's get into it. So the Palace arc, Palace, you know what I'm talking about. The Drake City. That's awesome. I mean, to get this idea that we got this magical door, which at the beginning, I don't think I understood the ramifications for this door. It's like, cool, now Aaron can link up with 𝐶elim and link up Liscor with 𝐶elim. That's great. That's fun. We get to have these adventures in this other city that feels a little bit like Liscor. I don't do the audiobook, so I'm probably going to butcher all these names. My bad. But my mom's name is Aaron, so I know I can say Aaron right. But to get that is really cool. But then this idea that Aaron can now link up the door with other cities makes it a legitimately good reason for Aaron and our main characters in this story to be able to go to different places. So that's great. And I always wanted to spend time in the city. I've heard characters going to these cities, and I'm jealous as a reader. I want to read more about them. So to get that was just awesome. And it was everything that I hoped it would be. I mean, these don't feel like every other Drake. They feel like they have their own culture. They feel stuck up and snobby, and just like I wanted them to be. I loved it. And to hear later on how selfish the Drakes can be, and how possessive they can be, and how that can impact their policymaking on a political side was a masterclass. That was awesome. This whole arc involving the... let me jump a little bit, because we'll go back to the palace thing. The dungeon crawling aspect. To have... I forget which adventuring crew it was. Their names kind of get jumbled up in my head. But the crew that goes down into the dungeon near the beginning of the story and meets up with 𝐿, a 𝐿 I love. Seeing more from 𝐿's head and the trauma that 𝐿 is going through. Literally, creating another persona within 𝐿. But then to help these people in the accidental release of these moths. And then you get to, you see that happening, but you don't really get the impact of it. But then later on in the story, you see the moths come out. And the fight that is really, 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 really cool was incredible. Because I really applied pirateaba for going to the grandest of the grand in this. Because it would have been very easy to have a moth come out and have them fight it. And that'd be the end of the story. But to have like 2 moths come out was like a wow moment. But then to hear that you had like dozens and dozens of moths come out, it had this impending sense of dread. And the fight in the tunnels with the Antinium, and finding out that they're fighting even more than everybody else, and everybody wanting the ants to come out, but they can't. These huge multiple point of views, and everybody going through trying to just use all of the powers that you feel like they have and finally coming out at once. Because you get this trickle effect in this book, in the series, where you see people's powers flare up every now and then, but you don't get them all at the same time. But to see, finally, after so much time, we get to see it in its fully evolved form was really special. And it would not have worked if this happens all the time. It would not have worked if this happens every few books. But to have it happen in book 7 felt like pirateaba has been teasing us all along and said, I have this in my arsenal, and I'm just going to lay it out at the perfect time when everything comes together. It was a masterclass. I mean, then to see the aftermath of that with the adventuring crew being in a legitimately good situation where they're trying to hide it and be scared about what they did. Feels like anybody might do the same thing, even though it's disgraceful. Really, really compelling stuff. Loved it. The Red Fang story that was going on. And by Red Fang, I mean the Red Fang goblins that are the hobgoblins that are staying in 𝐿's Inn, where you initially, your feelings change for these characters so much throughout the story. I mean, initially you kind of don't care that much. You're like, okay, cool. They get along with 𝐿, but they're not differentiated much from the goblins that initially stayed in 𝐿's Inn, with the Rags and the Rags' group that hangs out there. So you feel like it's just kind of like the same thing, but not as compelling, because these goblins don't really talk like Rags did. They grunt, and you don't really know what's going through their heads. But then to start getting some chapters from their heads, and you understand that they feel slighted, that they feel like ashamed, that they're letting their goblin friends die off because of the impacts, like this whole story is kind of about, but the impacts from the death of 𝐿. And to hear them say, we are ashamed, we need to go back out there and do goblin stuff, even though we love 𝐿 and the care that she's given us. We feel compelled to go out and do this thing. And then to do such a drastic thing, like sneak into the dungeon and try to steal the artifact so they can have weapons, and it working, was breathtaking. And such a wonderfully done chapter. And I can't wait to see how these characters go along in the story as it goes along. I mean, that's just great stuff. The King of Destruction arc was, I love the King of Destruction. And hearing more from Floss, I've heard people say that they don't love the Floss chapters, that they kind of gloss over them. I don't quite get it. I love the Floss chapters. I love watching this happen. But similar to kind of the 𝐿𝐴𝐻 arc, which I'll talk about in a second, I'm almost feeling like it's going too slow. And I know that it's a benefit of the series, but you get so little time with Floss. With Aaron and crew, slow works because you spend so much time with them. But with Floss, it feels like the story's not going anywhere. I get that it is, but I kind of feel like Floss has the same amount of landmass in his control than he did when I first met him. And I know that's not true, but you don't know this continent like you do. I forget the name of the main continent that is it Israel? I think Israel is the continent that the Wandering Inn's at. But in Chandrar, it just feels like I can't picture it, and it just feels like a kind of samey story going along. I'm here for it, but I wanted to pick up the pace a little bit. And so on the 𝐿𝐴𝐻 arc as well, I love 𝐿𝐴𝐻. I've heard similar complaints about 𝐿𝐴𝐻, about people just kind of gloss over these chapters. And I feel like 𝐿𝐴𝐻 is expanding, but it's not fast enough. I want 𝐿𝐴𝐻 to be a force in this world, and I want the story to speed up a little bit. But I'm here for it. But I still liked it. I really enjoyed the Magnolia interacting with him. I loved watching how he went about trying to impress the people that were with him. I thought the stuff involving the spring fairies was really well done. It differentiated themselves from the winter fairies. I liked the politicking on that side of things. I liked how he handled that situation. But I want to see him amass more power. I care for this character, and I want them to succeed. And the only way I can view them succeeding is to go down the inevitable path of the unlikely blind boy that amasses power. So I want to see more of that. The one part I didn't love about this story was the play section, where Aaron's, the idea that the inn gets bigger and they can do these plays. I thought it was entertaining. I did get a laugh. I don't get a lot of laughs out of this book, but there's this moment when they're performing Frozen, and I forgot which character said it, but they said something like, now that everybody drowned in the ship, is the play over? And Aaron's like, no, it just started. That's pretty funny. But yeah, the play stuff, ultimately, I don't love in this story when things that we know in our world are forced upon the rest of the world. I didn't love it when Aaron brought Christmas. That was one of my least favorite parts of the entire story. Now, and we're getting another one here. I want to experience the culture from these worlds impacting Aaron. I don't want as much Aaron trying to impact the others. I do find the cooking stuff, where Aaron invents these new meals and people get addicted to them, that's warm and cozy, and I don't mind it. But it's these other things that I'm not loving. I'm kind of just now realizing, too, that Ryoka wasn't in this book at all, which is cool. I like that pirateaba is willing to do that sort of thing, to say, like, look, there's this character that's probably beloved, spent a lot of time with this character. I mean, one of the books I feel like was 50% of the book was from Ryoka's perspective. Maybe it was the second or third book. And now Ryoka was barely even mentioned in this book. And that's cool. That just shows the grandness of the story. So, yeah, I'm all in. I can't wait to read the next one. I need to spend more time reading this series. It's hard because I don't have enough time. I have so many series I'm reading. But, I wish, and I'm not, going to do this, but, I wish I could just, pause everything in my life and go catch up. That's how much I love this thing. Just go spend the next, 4 or 5 months, read this thing nonstop and catch up. I'm not going to do it, but I do kind of, wish that. Because this is a story that I just can't stop thinking about. And I can't wait to be here for the next one. So, that is it for me. I've done this review way too long. This is, my longest book review ever. But thank you for sticking to it. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, JD, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, Orthodoxia, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tay C, Tahir, Tommy Rose, Zion, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Joe UK, Kat Mick, Michael Sugarman, Sky, Tyler, and Wacky. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.